Emmy Award-winning and Grammy-nominated producer and director Nicole London is here from New York City. She is the director and producer of The Disappearance of Miss Scott. Her other directing credits include Harriet Tubman, Visions of Freedom, Becoming Frederick Douglass, and the recent released We Want the Funk, part of PBS's Independent Lens. She was also the producer for Miles Davis, Birth of the Cool, for which she was nominated for a 2020 Grammy for Best Music Film, and she won the 2021 News and Documentary Emmy for Outstanding Arts and Culture Documentary. So come on up here, Nicole. I've had a fun little conversation with Nicole and learned that she has interviewed a lot of great musicians in her career. I'm just going to read a quick list here. Smokey Robinson, Questlove, George Clinton, Quincy Jones, Herbie Hancock, David Byrne, Ron Carter, Archie Shepp, Prince Paul, Kirk Franklin, Nona Hendrix, Mary Wilson, and then my card ran out of space. So, just really amazing getting a chance to look back at your filmography and all the work you've done as both a director and a producer. So I think, obviously you're a perfect person to make this film, and I imagine this is a big step for you, solo directing this film about a famous musician. So how did this come about for you? How did it get started?
Well, I was reached out to Fort Dak Batchel, who were looking for a director for this Hazel Scott film. It's actually a full circle moment for me because I had actually worked at American Masters as a production coordinator about 15 years ago. And the now director of American Masters recommended me for this film, and I thought it was a great opportunity to dive into more directing, especially solo directing. And Hazel's story, I'd seen the clip of the two pianos. I knew that she'd been married to Adam Clayton Powell, but I had no idea the large background of her activism, her personal activism. So it was a real, I was grateful for the opportunity to kind of tell her story for the first time.
Yeah, and so you didn't get to interview her personally, obviously, but you got to look through her autobiography and all of her letters, and I imagine that must have felt like interviewing her in some way. How difficult was it to pick from all the material you had? Because she wrote, dozens of pages, hundreds of pages?
Yeah, there was quite a long, big stack of manuscripts that she'd written throughout her life. But then, of course, I also did a ton of research. Karen Chilton wrote her biography. She was never able to publish her autobiography. It was rejected from a number of publishers. But she had it typed up and sort of didn't really have a shape to it. But Karen Chilton took a lot of those writings and did her own research, and then I did my own research on Hazel, and a lot of that is what you see up on the screen. Especially in collaboration with the other producers of the film and two really great editors, Mark Faison and Navin Haralal, who really brought her story to life.
Also, this is a great fit for you because you began your career as an archival producer, archivist, I guess. What was your first title there at, was it American Masters or a couple other places you worked too?
I worked on one documentary before working at American Masters, but my title at American Masters was production coordinator. And that was I did a lot of different things. So, one of the first two projects I worked on was a Joe Papp in 5 acts, which was one of the films highlighted in the Better Angels trailer. And that film had been in works of almost 15, 20 years. Before. So I was like, oh, it came out. So I was really surprised to see that. Finally. And then the first film that I really worked on in American Masters was Bob Dylan, No Direction Home. My second documentary job is working with Martin Scorsese, who's really liberal. But such a, obviously it was working with such a great talent, and that was really good.
He's a little giant.
That actually won the Grammy, I think, that year for Best Music Film. So.
Wow. So speaking of Best Music Films, you were runner-up for a Grammy, and I learned that the winner, you lost to Beyonce's Homecoming, is that right? I
don't think it was Homecoming, it was, maybe it was Homecoming. It was 2020, so
You lost to Beyonce.
To be nominated, of course. But we lost, everybody had said, oh, she should have won for Lemonade, but this was the next one. So whatever that was, that's what ended up winning. But in the end, it wasn't, you couldn't even be sorry for it, because that was actually the same morning that Kobe Bryant died. So we were at the Staples Center the day of the Grammys, and that completely sucked the air out of everything. So nobody cared who won or who lost. Like, we were just kind of there in like our party togs and, mourning that, right outside, everybody was gathering outside the Staples Center. So,
Wow.
The great part of it was like up until the night before, the parties.
Yeah, we as viewers at home, we don't really see what the real vibe in the room is.
Yeah, they cut to commercial break and it was dead silent inside the Staples Center. So.
Yeah, wow.
But, like I said, it was an honor to be nominated.
Yeah, that was for the Miles Davis documentary?
Yes,
yeah. Very great. So you mentioned the Better Angels Society and seeing that other film finally come to completion. How helpful was it to get the runner-up prize for Better Angels?
Oh, so much so. I mean, that was a real surprise. That we kind of submitted as a long shot. But I have to, again, thank Catherine Malone France for really being a champion for this film. She really helped us raise money beyond that prize to really get us to the finish line, to get us enough money to finish the archival, and especially to be able to bring on Shirley Ralph to do, to kind of narrate Hazel's manuscripts for the film. And she was amazing to work with. Super, this is after she won the Emmy. I was like, oh, there's no chance, that we would be able to get her. But turns out she's a huge Hazel Scott fan, being Jamaican herself. Her father had introduced her to Hazel Scott, when she was a young girl. So she was very excited to be able to be involved in this project. And, was kind of hoping to kind of get a biopic made of Hazel herself.
Yeah, well, she was a great fit. She sounded just like Hazel to me, so
yeah,
great. And the earlier cut of the film that I saw did not include animation, so I guess that was after winning the Better Angels Society, you were able to complete the animation. Right?
That was a big part of it. Yeah. Archival can take you so far, but there were some certain gaps that felt like we couldn't quite get there with archival, so we were able to work with an the same people that did the graphics for the film, like the newspaper treatments, and some of the photo, creating photo books, the photo book look in the film. They also did the animation, and it took a lot of back and forth to kind of get it, like some of the earlier drafts were, pretty horrifying. But but then we kind of
we won't talk about those.
We don't talk about that. But then we kept working at it, and then we kind of figured out, settled on a kind of like an Art Deco kind of look. That I really kind of kind of Harlem Renaissance. We kind of take a little bit of inspiration from like a Jacob Lawrence or Romare Bearden kind of thing, and that's how we kind of came up with that.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I when I watched it, I had my imagination. It was way different from what it finally ended up as, and the colors.
Me too.
The color scheme was really wonderful in the animation.
Yeah, that was like I had went looking online for Art Deco patterns, and I found like a Pinterest board of like certain Art Deco wallpapers was what it was. Yeah. And I was like, can we do something like these kind of color schemes? And they were able to really translate that into the animation, so that really worked out.
Yeah. One other thing that I thought you might want to talk about is that we talked about is how a lot of your filmmaker friends are struggling to get their films made right now because of like the industry, and I'm sure a lot of people are interested in that here. Like, would it be harder to finish this film like this year as opposed to last year?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know if we would have been able to finish this film, or I have another film that's out right now called We Want the Funk.
Go see that. We Want the Funk. It's so fun.
And it's also amazing. You can see it on YouTube actually.
Yeah.
They came out this year, but if we were like in a more fundraising phase this year, I don't think these films would have been able to be finished in the same way that they were, just because of the political climate. And every foundation is also kind of feeling the tightening of the screw, but especially PBS being and NPR being under the gun right now. I don't think that it's more than ever it's important to support the arts and support in any way you can, coming to screenings, really getting the word out and seeing these projects. But, if you have the means to donate in any capacity, that's especially helpful right now, because a lot of projects a lot of filmmakers I know have had their funding rescinded. So it's like, they're already, having to pay people, and then all of a sudden the money's gone, and how do they continue to, pay some of their crew and stuff?
Yeah.
It's a dark time.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect segue into my fundraising pitch for the Hindsight Film Festival last year. Check out our website. Talk to me later if you want to know more. Thanks. Bye.